That takes care of that. And now we can start the show. Short Box Nation. Without further ado, let's welcome one of the hardest working guys in comics. It's Tim Seeley. What up, Tim? How you doing?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And that's so lovely. I don't usually get the applause, so I'll take it.
You don't see all the people behind me in the studio? I mean, it's a full
Just
crowd
packing
here.
them in there, man. Yeah,
Oh my God, I'm still choked up about talking
All those
about.
rock star artists.
Oh my God, Panel Punk Comics has got me choked up. Tim, I decided for this interview, I'm gonna start off a little different than my usual kind of like momentum and outline I do. Did you know that I'm gonna see if I can maybe surprise you or teach you something about yourself?
Sure.
Did you know that you currently have a perfect score / rating on ratemyprofessor.com? There is a rating that says 100% would take again. And I found a nice little review written by, I'm assuming, a former student. Tim Seeley is great to have if you want to learn about drawing comics. He provides great information for the class so everyone can learn. So far, I'm learning well, and I'm getting an idea on how comic panels work, and I get to create my own short story. Tim, for the uninitiated, for anyone else that might be surprised about this, I don't know if it's still the case or not. You correct me if I'm wrong, but adjunct professor at the Columbia College of Chicago, right? You taught art?
And I am a full professor. I'm a visiting professor. I got promoted.
My man.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, hold on. I got to give you another one of those, man.
There you
Because
go.
I know the world of academia is just as rough as the world of comics. So congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I chose the two toughest things to. Maybe I should try to become a fucking singer after this, just to really challenge myself.
You're like, I'm an astronaut on the weekends too, because it's challenging.
That's a hard job to get. I'll take it. Yeah.
I guess I'm curious to know, like, reading that, can you talk about how teaching, like, how to, art and comics, how that feeds into the work that you do? And do you ever find yourself, I guess, learning from students or maybe like reaffirming things that you already know?
Oh yeah. I mean, the job. Basically, 5 years ago, my wife and I were blessed with a young daughter, but she was not a planned kid, and so I had to adjust my life. I had a studio with several other artists here in Chicago, and when we had a kid, I had to come home. We had to buy a house that had room for a baby, and
room for all your awesome 80s action figures and
Yeah.
everything else you got behind you.
Well, if I didn't buy the house, those were going to have to go.
Oh no, we can't do that.
So I was like, yeah, we'll have to just buy a house.
Yeah.
And so I moved up into the attic of this place, which is this place right now, and it meant that I was not as social as I was before. I used to sit and draw with people, I'd write with people, I did all this stuff. So I did that for a while, and it was great. My kid is amazing, love her, but I was starting to go crazy. Like I'm not an introvert. A lot of creative people are, and I'm not. And so I was kind of like, what, I got to do something. I can't just be here all the time. And so I got my sister-in-law, Jenny Frizen, had gotten a call from Columbia, and they had asked if she wanted to teach a class. And if you know Jenny, she was like, no, not at all. I do not want to be a teacher. And so she had given them my name. And then Gene Ha called me, who's also a comic artist, a friend of mine. He was like, yeah, they called me to ask about me teaching a class. And I said, no, but I said, you might be the guy. And so 2 people had recommended me, and finally Columbia said, okay, well, we'll call Tim Seeley. And so they just called me and were like, hey, would you like to, do a drop-in for a class? And so I was like, yes, I'll get out of the house. Oh my God, that's a great idea. And Columbia College is downtown, in this, in the South Loop in Chicago. And so this sounded great to me. And I did it. I love teaching. I was teaching a cartooning class. I developed it. I was making it up as I go along. I was having a great time. It's like 5 years ago. And then pandemic locked everything down. So I taught 6 classes, and then I spent a year and a half at home. So, but that year and a half teaching from this very fucking chair right here, doing Zoom, like I really learned how to do it because I wasn't in person. There was a whole bunch of things I had to consider, and it kept me like interacting with people. I'm pretty sure, Zoom, that class, and my wife kept me sane during the pandemic lockdown. So, so when it came back, then it was sort of like, do you want to do this? And I got so much benefit from socializing with students, talking about comics, reaffirming what I love about comics, and then watching them make stuff. I can be as proud, of them coming up with something really good as myself making a comic that I like. So like, why not keep doing this? So I've been doing it for 5 years, and I just in January got hired full time. So
Hell yeah.
I get health insurance, and
Hell yeah, man. You can't
so,
look, you can't doubt that the benefits go a long way. So
yeah.
congratulations. I guess I'm curious, do you have any, I guess, star pupils, any students that went on to like do comics full time? Anyone
Oh
come to
yeah, I
mind?
mean, every semester I've got students rolling out, and I teach in the animation department, illustration department. So
Oh, cool.
when the kids come to me, they're almost always animation students or illustration students. And so a fair amount of students, I almost feel bad about it sometimes, but a fair amount of them come out like, you know what, I'm going to do comics. I'm like, okay, cool. Just don't major in comics. There's no need for you to major in comics. Just major in graphic design or illustration or animation. Keep your animation degree, but do comics. And so, my assistant is one of my former students. I work with a couple of students on stuff that are former students of mine. So, I'm always happy to have them, come out, want to do this stuff, and then I help them as much as I can. My student Sarah, she is actually, doing this now. She helped color stuff for me. We're doing a YA book together. She did stuff in Hack Slash Body Bags. She colored Zoe Thorogood's
Oh, wow.
Hack Slash book with Zoe. So yeah, as much as I can, I try to, reward the hard workers and stuff. And Sarah's certainly one of those. My student Kevin West is one of those. He's doing stuff. Both of them appear as characters in Godzilla versus Chicago. So
Man,
yeah, people roll in. I use them for stuff for sure.
that's rad. You know what? It's funny. I actually ended up reading the Godzilla versus Chicago, specifically your story, and loved it, man. I mean, this story about two star-crossed lovers finding love on this train in the middle of, a Godzilla rampage was a lot of fun. So that's cool to hear that, like, real life students and, people that like, you use them inside the story. And it sounds like, sorry, it sounds like you keep yourself like pretty much like surrounded by very talented people. It sounds like art kind of runs in the family. I know your wife is a co-founder with you with the company.
Yes.
Hold on one second. Let me actually find where that's at. Oh my god, I had it here somewhere. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. All right, so your wife is as a partner in Panel Punk Originals. You worked with your brother Steve Seeley on the He-Man art book back in the day. I didn't know that Jenny Frison was your sister-in-law. So yeah, I guess any other talented people in your family in terms of art?
Yeah, I mean, we just, I try to. Like I said, I'm not an introvert, so I like to do stuff with people. I like to see creativity in action. So and so it's kind of my crack, I guess, to some degree. So yeah, my wife, she is a fine artist, a painter, but I got her. She's working managing artist for our original art company.
Cool.
We also have an art gallery. I run that with my brother Steve.
Oh, awesome.
My wife also Sean Smith, who's an illustrator, and Anthony Hall, who's an illustrator. And so yeah, I don't know. I just like doing stuff. I mean, I probably like doing stuff too much, but we did an art show for Godzilla vs. Chicago here. It was awesome. We teamed up with Howling Pages, the comic shop here. It was the biggest art show we've ever done. It was awesome. We were on the evening news for it and stuff. So like, I just like doing shit. I don't know. I can't sit, and that's probably what will kill me. But also, like, it keeps me sane, I guess.
Yeah, no, dude, I'm the same way. I'm not a homebody. Even when I'm home, I'm not sitting down longer than 5 minutes. It drives my wife crazy when we're trying to watch like Severance, and she's like, "For the love of God, sit the fuck down." So we watch this show, and I'm like, "No, I can go do this real quick. But I wanted to stay on the topic of Chicago because it almost feels like if I was to go to Chicago, which I've been a few times, but it almost feels like if you were to throw a rock just in any direction, you're gonna hit an artist, a comic person, or some talented person in Chicago. I guess, Tim, what's in the water in Chicago that so many talented comic people call that place home? I try to do a running list. I've got Daniel Warren Johnson. He's from Chicago. Ryan Brown.
Yep.
Ryan Brown. I think Scotty Young lived there for a while. I think he lives in like North Carolina now. Or Kansas City. Alex Ross, I think, is also in Chicago. Yes. Ashley Wood, Chicago. am I missing anyone? But specifically, I want to know what's the comic
I
culture.
mean,
I
Gene
guess.
Haas here,
Oh,
Joel
okay.
Thompson, Brian Azzarello.
Damn.
Yeah, we got a lot of them.
Oh, that's super
Yeah,
talented. So
Mike
I guess,
Norton.
is it the
Yeah.
art school in Chicago that produces, I guess, so many, I guess, comic centric people? Or I guess, what is the comic culture / scene like in Chicago? And how does it find its way into your work?
I mean, it definitely. So part of it is what you said. There for a long time there was the Academy of Art here. It's now closed by that. It turned out people like Alex Ross and
Hmm.
Jill and Brian Azzarello, they all went there, and then uh, so there was a basis of the creators here from that. There was also comic companies like First and Comico and stuff, and then Devil's Due later. So there was always that stuff. But I think the big part of it is just that Chicago is, the only. And I don't say this as a criticism of other places, but it's the only sort of like art supporting place within hundreds of miles,
Hmm.
right? Like there's no sort of jobs, I guess, for art stuff. Iowa down to Southern Illinois, over to Indiana, up to
Sure.
Michigan, over to Wisconsin. It's a zip. It pinches everybody, into this one place because it's the one place, where there's a community, and then once there's a community, then you bring more people in, and then people can help each other out. And I personally came here for that very reason, and so then I'm trying to pay it forward. People paid it forward for me when I first moved here. You know, the people that were the previous generation, like they helped me out. Hillary Barta and Gene
Hmm.
Hahn and Brian Azzarello and Jill Thompson and all those people were like, hey, I can get you in the right direction and stuff. So now when the young people come here, like Daniel Warren Johnson, when he shows up, like we're all like, kids, you're great. Can we point you in a direction? Can we help you
Yeah.
out? And Caroline Cash is here, and all these other. And part of it's just it's a kind of town where we were talking about this when we did the art show. It's a big city, a very big city, right? It's 3 million in the city, and it's millions around, but it's not that big. So everybody who does shit knows everybody else who does shit. Like, all the people who do fine art know the cartoonists. All the people, the people who do breweries know the fine artists, and the comic people, and know the, know the rappers, and like everybody who does creative stuff knows each other here. And so the community is pretty tight, and you can always, sort of hook each other up. So, like the local breweries, the comic book artists do the labels, and it's like the graphic designers and the street artists, and and that's a big part of it. And our gallery is one of the reasons we did that was just for that reason. Like, let's bring all the people that we know separately together.
Yeah.
The illustrators and the designers and the musicians and the brewers, that people that make beer, and the people who make cool coffee, and it doesn't matter. We're just like, if you're creative here, you support each other. That's the job.
And I want to say, I had Daniel Warren Johnson on the show a couple years ago, I think when Transformers was just announced, and he echoed something very similar, that there's a lot of intermingling among just creative people in general. Like you're saying, graphic designers are hanging out with the rappers, who are hanging out with the muralists and the comic people and the animation folks. So you have like this really cool kind of like stew of just creativity and support. And I know a couple of artists that have moved from like here in Jacksonville. To your point about like, it's just not sustainable to be a full-time artist in a place like, unfortunately, like Jax, they've had to move to like some place like Chicago, where the art scene is, developed, and they can make a full-time living doing what they do. So that's awesome to hear. And it got me thinking, I'm thinking about Chicago, and it got me thinking about the last time I went, which was last year. I went for C2E2. I did a panel there, and I stayed with my buddy, a good friend of the show, a very good friend of mine. His name's Blake Simone. So to me, he's like kind of my Chicago know-it-all, tour guide. He grew up there. I mean, he knows that place really well. So I reached out to him. I was like, hey, man, I got Tim Seeley on the podcast, Chicago's very own. Give me a question that a Chicagoan would appreciate. And he was like, oh, I got you. So he wants to know he asked me two different questions for you. One, if there's a superhero besides Riri Williams that you could change their city of origin, who would it be, and why are they now from Chicago?
Oh man.
Yeah,
Well,
let's start with that one. I'll give you the second
okay,
one next.
that's a good one. Well, I was actually recently thinking about this because uh, they back in the '80s when DC bought the Charlton characters, they set Blue Beetle in Chicago, and so
Oh,
they
wow.
I was reading a bunch of those old issues, and it totally made sense because like the way that they set the character, and he was like this, he was a tech guy, but he was like living downtown, and like he would fly the Beetle out across Lake Michigan and stuff. I thought that was so perfect. I don't know. I haven't read the recent iterations of that of that Blue Beetle, Ted Cord Blue Beetle, but I would love to do Blue Beetle in Chicago. That would be great because it should be. I think the vibe of that is much better and it makes more sense. Chicago has sometimes been a Batman sort of location. Gotham is sort of like, and obviously the Dark Knight, the Nolan movies were filmed in a large part here. And that kind of makes sense to me in a way, but I feel like Chicago always gets shit on for being like, people perceive it as being this like crime-ridden hellhole, and that's not true.
What? Really?
I mean, for sure, like Fox News will tell you every day about, what kind of crime-ridden hellhole this is, and it's war in the streets and gangs rule everything, all that shit. And if you live here,
Batman war crimes.
Yeah, right, yeah. Exactly. And but it's just like to scare white people and shit, obviously. But like, so I kind of always bristle at like, oh, it's this corrupt city and it's full of all this terrible stuff, which Gotham is fake for a reason because it can be that, right? So I kind of bristle at that, but like, I think Blue Beetle makes a lot of sense. Like this company guy, and he's kind of enthusiastic, kind of lighthearted. He's Midwestern. Midwesterners are funny. Chicagoans are funny. Like it's a place where humor is sort of valued. We have comedians all over the place and shit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So Blue Beetle, I put him. If they moved him, I'm putting him back.
Damn right.
I hope they didn't move to fucking LA or something, which disgusts me. That we lose all kinds of people here in LA anyway. So if you're a comedian here, you move to LA eventually. Like all people I knew who were comedians back in 2009, 2010 are now like on TV shows and have podcasts and shit. So.
Okay. All right. His second question, which I think you'll appreciate as a Chicagoan, he wants to know, are you a pizza puff and old style kind of guy or a thin crust and RC cola kind of hero?
Man, you know what? People like to like either sort of saddle us with Chicago style pizza, which is the deep dish kind of thing, and be like, that's some bullshit, or they're like super enthusiastic about it. If you live here, you love that kind of deep dish Chicago-style pizza, but you do not eat it very often because it will kill you. But I love that kind of pizza. And here, the place to go, there's a place called Pequod's. It's got two locations, one in sort of closer to downtown and one up in the near Burbs. And their pizza is so good. It's a caramelized crust. It's thick crust. It is incredible. If you've never been and you want to know what a thick crust deep dish pizza can be, Pequod's is the one to do. Now, I'm going to also say, do not eat a bunch of pieces of pizza. Do not go every day that you're here.
But I want to die, Tim, from good pizza. This sounds, I don't know, this is a hell of a way to go. I kind of want to go out this way.
But I mean, it is one of those things that people will talk about it, and then you'll go and be like, nope, I see why you were talking about that.
Cool.
I'm with you there. That is some shit. We have the other ones that are sort of the more famous, we've got Giordano's and stuff like that people know, and they're fine and whatever. But you can get that probably like, anywhere. It's kind of the corporate version.
Sure.
Pequod's is a legit thing. If you can go to the original location, which is up in a nearby burb up here in the Northwest, completely worth it. You will not want to do it again very quickly afterwards, but it is totally worth it for that
Hell
one day. It's great stuff.
Damn, that's a great. And I'm like stupid excited. I might actually try to make C2E2 this year just to go, eat my weight in pizza. I'm excited also for Blake to hear this and shoot me a text about his thoughts on this. But thank you for entertaining that. All right, I want to move on to another topic. We're going to get to Red Sonja and Army of Darkness, but I've got a question about something I got in the mail. Someone at Image Comics likes me a lot. His name is a big shout out to Dan Coyle. He goes by Diesel Dan Comics. Yeah, great guy. He sent me something in the mail. He was like, "Hey man, Merry Christmas. I sent you something in the mail. I think you'll enjoy it." I had no idea what it was going to be. So when the package got to me, it was a pretty heavy fucking package. I'm like, damn, how many comics did he pack in here for your boy? It was just one comic. And I was like, oh shit, this is a beast. And what he sent me for the video listeners, yes, he sent me your Revival Compendium, which collects all 47 issues. Actually, I think I made a Instagram reel about this. So if anyone's curious to see what it looks like, it's on the Shortbox Instagram. For the YouTube watchers, they're seeing it now. But anyways, it's a colossal book. It collects the entire series of Revival. And when I posted it on the Instagram, I got a lot of positive comments like, yo, that's the one. Can't wait for you to check it out. Let me know how it is. So I guess, Tim, if you will help sell this for anyone that is, maybe just pique their interest or curious, I guess, what can I expect from this? Like, what type of journey am I going on starting or reading Revival?
Well, it's going to be a Sci-Fi Network TV show soon, so there's that. I don't know if
Oh,
that's
hell
a
yeah.
selling point. But it is a story about a small town in Wisconsin in which one day a number of the people who have recently died come back from the dead, but they are not zombies. They are not mindless. They are just themselves, but slightly off. And so the town gets closed off in the middle of the winter, sort of stuck in quarantine. We started this book before COVID, way before COVID. But they are essentially put into shutdown while people try to figure out why people came back from the dead. And then this local cop is stuck being the investigator for a murder of her sister, who is also alive again. So it's a murder mystery, except the murder victim is back and doesn't remember what happened to her. So it's about family, it's about the Midwest, it's about cabin fever, being stuck in the house, which we all understand now after that comic came out.
Hell yeah, we do.
And it's a horror story, but it's also like really family focused kind of story.
And it's gonna be a sci-fi series. I guess what's the where are they at in that? In the process of that?
Done. I was on set in December
Whoa!
for the last episode. So
wow,
yeah.
That is awesome, man. I mean, I guess I had to feel like, being on set of like this world that you use pen and pencil to like create along with Mike Norton, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, it was weird as shit because you well, so like when I got in there, I had to go they filmed a lot of it in St. John, Canada, which is way far north and way far east. Mm-hmm. And so you got to fly into Bangor, Maine, and you got to drive 3.5 hours to St. John. And so I get there. It's like a Friday night, and it is like it's Thursday night, and it was like 10 at night. And I go straight to the set with the producer, and they're filming the scene in the story in which a truck full of dead bodies stolen from the area that are believed to make people immortal has tipped over on the highway. So I roll up into this. It's fucking cold. It was like -10, Jeez. And it's in the woods in Canada. And there's a truck tipped over and a bunch of body parts spread all over the street. And there's like 100 people scrambling around in the cold, wearing these big, Canadian coats, special Canadian coats, running around like picking up this stuff and moving body parts and lighting all this shit. And all I could think was like, I wrote that like in my office, like just doing this shit, there we go, And now like a whole bunch of people's lives have been completely displaced and they're out in the cold before Christmas, filming this shit. So it's super weird. It was wonderful. I got to meet the cast and hang out with the two main characters who are sisters in the story, and they're both wonderful. And it's just like you kind of have this weird connection because you don't know each other, but you're playing somebody I wrote, and now we have this like weird thing, and like
I've never thought about that, especially from like a comic writer standpoint. Like, I guess the closest experience I can relate to is sometimes meeting like people who listen to like the show. I'm at like a convention and it's like, hey, I listen to Shortbox, and it feels like they already, at least in their perspective, like they already know me. But I'm like, this is the first time we're meeting. It's a little weird, but they're like, I've listened to hundreds of hours of you talking to people. So I imagine it was maybe like that, where you're like, I know your personality, your intention, like you've been in their brain.
Yeah, in a weird way, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, but it's also like, the woman who played the main character, Melanie, I've watched her stuff. She was in the show Winona Earp on Sci-Fi, and so and she's in Star Trek, and so, I felt like I know her, even though I don't.
Sure.
I've watched her. She does she was doing an Instagram show, and so like you kind of feel like you know them too. So you have this weird sort of thing. But it also, in the case of those two, and most of the people I worked with on that show, was just they were also wonderful.
Awesome.
And it was just like, you feel kind of bonded and so we got to go sing karaoke and stuff. And like I'm so comfortable with these people, even though I don't know them. I'm like up on stage singing Danzig to them and shit, you know. Yeah, it was great, and I kind of came back from it a little shook, honestly, just because it was just like, well, this is not sort of the previous experience of my creative career where where
like
comics, you sort of put stuff out and it's just like,
yeah, like you reached the mountaintop. Like that's like I mean, like the tip of the spear kind of, like having
sure.
a comic adaptation form into, a legit show. I mean, I guess maybe the next level would be like, a huge blockbuster movie, but I still think that's huge to go from, pen and paper to, full on production crew, actors and a show schedule.
Yeah. I mean, and we had done it. Mike and I had done it with this guy Luke Boyce and Brett Hayes, with these two guys that were just like we were originally going to do the show at NBC, and we just couldn't get it going, and so we took it back when the rights were up. We were like, let's not do Hollywood, and so we worked with these guys that they were working as a small production studio. They're here in Illinois, and our thinking was just let's just do it so we're in the loop. And it took a long time, but it worked. I mean, and those guys, every promise they made to us, they came through on, and they worked their asses off, and got this thing done. And in the end, Luke worked on on Revival more than I did. Like I've worked on it for 5 years. Luke worked on it has been working on it for 8. So
wow.
So, it's weird. It's very weird.
Okay, and when does the show air? How much time? I'm trying to figure out how much time I have to try to get through this giant compendium before watching the show.
I don't know an exact date,
Okay.
but they will announce the date soon. But the show is shot; it's all that stuff's all done. So
awesome, that's good to hear. I guess you mentioned a small town, the story taking place in a small town, which I know is another a setting that you use in one of my favorite comics of last year. I think this was, if I didn't say it was my favorite comic of 2024, I might have said it in 2023. But Local Man, which you do alongside Tony Fleeks, who I had a chance to interview I think last year as well, who is also writing, who's at the time writing an Army of Darkness comic too. So I'm like, wow, these guys are really like best friends. But Local Man, I just got, I just want to at least give you flowers for Local Man because I genuinely love that comic, man. And I realized that I finished, or I left off at issue 9 or 10, which was the second story arc. I think it was called Dry Season.
Yeah.
And I realized, I was like, oh shit, there was more issues. So I started reading the new run this week, and lo and behold, I'm like, wait a minute, this shit just jumped from 11 to issue 25. I've got like so many issues to go to. But then I realized, like, oh, okay, this is like another kind of nod to like the Image years. And I gotta say, man, I said this to Tony, but Tim, one of my favorite parts of Local Man is going to sound super weird, but is the letter column section where I think you write most of those.
We alternate, yeah.
Okay, you guys alternate, but dude, I love those so much. Just to hear like you and Tony's perspective about comics and the Image years, how that's influenced you guys, and just like the raw honesty is something I really appreciate. But I would like to know, what is it about those early Image comics? We're talking Youngblood, Spawn, Wildcat, Savage Dragon, etc., that like still continue to inspire you, many years later. Like, I guess what kind of energy or inspiration do those comics still give you?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just the sheer authenticity. And I think that the thing I really like about them, and I liked about them then, I didn't recognize it, and then kind of what eventually sort of drove me off them, but then when I come back to them, reattached me to it, is that it was just the perspective of the cartoonist with utter confidence in what they were doing, trying to make something like without this corporate bonds. And in that sort of, and they were young, they were all really young guys.
Mm-hmm.
Rob was like 23, 24, and, maybe Todd was 26, 27, somewhere in there. And Jim, and they're just like pouring this stuff out they're not like the best writers on earth, and they're
sure,
but they're like relying on their just raw art energy, and like there's an authenticity to that comes back to me as I get older, because the older you get, the less you see that authenticity. You see stuff kind of cloaked in either sort of a learned I've got to fit in. I've got to do it the way it's supposed to be done. Or you just become really good at something, become kind of refined, and that both those things are valid ways to do stuff, obviously. And being refined is the preferred outcome of a creator. But there's something nice about the rawness and the missteps and the absolute weirdness, of like just sort of hungry, horny, young 20 somethings, just like doing something and not really knowing how to do it. I
Yeah.
think that really always comes back to me.
Yeah, it was like they didn't really have a. I mean, I'm sure Jim Lee of the Image years would never, probably in a million years, seen himself as what is he, like the chief operating
Yeah, he's like a
some
Warner
chief.
Brothers executive. Yeah,
Yeah, like some high level mark. So it is crazy to like see where they started, like in the mission for Image, and to see them like make good on it. Like
yeah,
Todd McFarlane, great example. Rob Liefeld, and Eric Larson still going strong.
yeah,
Savage Dragon.
absolutely.
Yeah, they are truly like one of comics' best success stories. So I say all
And
that to say,
and
yeah,
failures. I mean, in the same
yeah,
way,
yeah,
right? And just to be and honest, I think they'd say the same thing. Is like all the company they made is incredible, and
hmm
we are so lucky to have it, and all those sort of things. But not all of them sort of uh, went through the promise of what it was meant to be, obviously. And in a weird way, like it you know the things that it did wrong are also things I love about it. In a
hmm,
weird way, like looking back, you know, the mistakes they made, the sort of crass commercialism that they kind of were putting
hmm.
out all these books with so many covers and collectibles and all this shit that didn't work, right? It didn't hold readers. It kind of I sort of love all that shit too because it's it, we all learn from it. I hope, or we didn't because we're back there again. But like you saw what happens when you don't rely on that authenticity. It doesn't work anymore, right? Like
Hmm.
people can see through it, and all those books that were just sort of launched as a money grab, they don't hold up. They didn't attract people then. People saw them, read them, went, "Oh, this is bullshit."
Yeah,
And so I think to me that's it informed my everything I do now. Like I always try to make something authentic. I really try not to do things that are, just for money. I try to make sure that I always have something that I'm attached to about it. I always, no matter what it is. So I think I really appreciate all the lessons I learned, even if some of those things were, not necessarily good.
yeah, and I think that authenticity is on full display, especially in like Local Man. I mean, even going back to like Batman Eternal, which I really liked. But I really enjoyed it when it was coming out. Tim, I promise I'm gonna get to Red Sonja versus the Army of Darkness, but first I want to acknowledge that you have an amazingly filled spinner rack in your room, within the camera view, and it got me thinking about something that you wrote on your website. You mentioned that since the age of 5, you could remember picking up your first comic in a grocery store and then falling in love with sequential art and comics. I guess, but you don't really describe what the first comic is. And I guess I'm curious to know, like, what's your earliest memory of a comic book, of holding a comic book or reading, or do you know like which one got you hooked into the fandom?
Absolutely. It's right there.
Oh
It's
wow.
mounted on the wall right there. It is Amazing Spider-Man 230, which is the to fight the unbeatable foe, Spidey versus Juggernaut.
Oh,
Uh,
classic.
so it was basically at the same time I
Classic.
got that. I think it was 1982 or 1983, and then comics were coming with the Master of the Universe figures.
Hmm.
So my first He-Man guy had it was kind of more of a storybook, but then the next issues that came after it, they were actually by Dan Mishkin, who did Blue Beetle, and Mark Texiera, and so those were like my earliest comics. So at the same time, I got the 1-2 punch of Spider-Man and He-Man, and so that kind of made me a fan for life.
And I guess obviously a He-Man correspondent because you did that art book with your brother. Have you had a chance to write, I guess, Spider-Man in the same vein?
No, not really. I mean, I've done read them for crossovers. I did them for that.
Hmm. Spider-Gwen, I think.
Yeah, I wrote
Like,
Spider Gwen. I wrote this the Unforgiven was a vampire crossover thing. But I've never had a run on Spider Man. It's the
hmm.
one thing I haven't done actually. I wrote a Juggernaut story for X Men Infinity Comics, so
Oh
that
wow.
was scratching that itch. But I didn't get to. I haven't written like a run on Spider Man
Yeah.
yet.
Do you have any, I guess, would you say Spider-Man is like a White Buffalo character? Do you have any other characters, titles, whatever, that you're like, man, I definitely got to do that before this is all up? Because I got to say, man, you looking at your, bibliography, I mean, you got G.I. Joe covered, you got Batman covered, you got He-Man covered. It seems that doing projects and working on characters and titles that, mean something to you, is very important. Like, what are some other, I guess, White Buffalo characters, titles, projects?
I mean, the only one I have left is Spider-Man, and then I have Sleepwalker and Darkhawk left from Marvel '90s stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only ones I have left. Like everything else, everything I loved, I've basically worked on in some capacity. I mean, I would love to do like a Tiger book sometime. I don't think that'll ever happen. I don't think they're gonna do anything. But I got to do, I've worked on Savage Dragon and Witchblade and Spawn and all this stuff that I love from that era. I've worked on Wildcats. I put fucking Milk and Cheese and Hack Slash, so I got to do them. Like I've done everything I said I would do. So, yeah, I guess the only thing I have left is Spider-Man, then Darkhawk and Sleepwalker. Those two.
Well, I can't wait for one day seeing a solicitation that has your name as writer next to a Spider-Man title. I think that's in the immediate future, man. We're putting it out there.
I'll put it in the world. Let's see.
There we go. All right. Speaking of titles and projects, let's finally get around to talking about Red Sonja and Army of Darkness. It's your new comic series coming out through Dynamite. One of many, actually, for the record. It's not just like the only thing that you're currently doing. You're also doing a Peacemaker project for DC. I'll get to talking about that here in a sec, but Red Sonja versus Army of Darkness is Dynamite's, newest crossover. They seem to love doing crossovers because I just spoke to Joe Casey about his Space Quest series, which is Johnny Quest, and Space Ghost, which I'm very excited for, and also very excited about Red Sonja and Army of Darkness. But Tim, I want to know whose idea was it? Whose idea was it to combine the sword and sorcery world of Red Sonja with the dark magic world of Army of Darkness? Like, how the idea for this crossover come about?
This was definitely Dynamite. I think it was Joe Ryban specifically. But, I know those guys. I worked with them a lot. We did Hack Slash, Army of Darkness. I wrote the Chaos series for them. I've worked on, covers for them for a whole bunch of stuff. Lots of Army of Darkness stuff. But we had talked about doing something. And I pitched them a couple things that I wanted to do. And they were kind of like, yeah, maybe that. And then the email came back, which was just, what do you think about doing Red Sonja and Army of Darkness? And I was like, yep. You don't need to say anything else. I was like, yeah, sign me up for that. I'm absolutely in.
Now, is it because you were like a really big fan of Red Sonja or Army of Darkness or both? Like, I guess what was the draw?
I mean, Army of Darkness specifically is one of my favorite things on Earth. I mean, that's just like for sure. And I've worked on it before. That crossover with Hack Slash and stuff. And just always come back to that character. I can write Ash in my sleep. Like he's an idiot. And he's abrasive, and he's overconfident, and I love him, and I can just... In fact, Hack Slash started out as an Army of Darkness pitch, so...
cool.
So all, that stuff I can just always come up with stuff for. But with Red Sonja, when I was a kid, was super into barbarian shit, which is because of He-Man. But Conan, Red Sonja, that was all that stuff coming out of Marvel at the time, so I had those issues from the Marvel run, the Frank Thorne ones. From when I was a kid, and then I had like this Red Sonja novels and shit when I was a kid too. So, but I guess when he sent that email, I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I was like, "Wait, have I never worked on Red Sonja?" I was like, "No, I haven't. I've done a cover or two, but I never fucking worked on Red Sonja." I was like, "That can't be right." So I was like, "Well, now I really got to,
yeah."
So, but yeah, so it's combined. I mean, I know this stuff. There's also a thing like sometimes when I'm really busy and I got school and all that shit. It's really great to work on stuff that I don't have to do research. Because if I have to do research, that takes a bunch of time, But like for Red Sonja and fucking Ash, I don't have to do any research. I saw the movie. I read every goddamn comic. I just read Tony's Ash comic, and Army of Darkness and stuff. So, and then Red Sonja was like, I know this character. I know the deal. I know she's Hyrcanian mercenary. I know all this shit. I'm like, I can do this. So, I had an idea like right away.
Huh. What is your, I guess in the case of like when you have to do research, what goes into your, is it as simple as like just finding a bunch of back issues, reading that? But I guess like how deep do you go in terms of research?
I mean, if you don't stop me, I'll just keep researching. Then that's, that's kind of why I have to be really careful about it. Because like stuff that I don't know really well, that I have worked on in the past, like I'll get weird with it. I'll just have piles of books and just get really into it. And
Yeah.
sometimes, now as I get older, it's like, well, maybe I didn't need to do that much research, but I kind of like doing research. I like getting the vibe. I like knowing kind of, all the aspects of the character so I don't, repeat something or whatever.
Sure.
So, but yeah, like, I'm trying to think, there was a book I did last year that I just kept reading. I just kept buying shit. I can't remember what is. I know for sure when I did Lobo versus Superman, I read so many. I think I read every existing Lobo book that I could find. And when I did Vigilante, like it wasn't even really that important. I read all the old Marv Wolfman ones, even though like James Gunn's
Yeah, it's a
Vigilante
completely
is,
radically different one.
yeah, it's like not even really similar. I read every Vigilante comic I could find, and
That's my type of research, man. That is the reason why I keep my iPad charged by
yeah.
my nightstand. And my wife's like, "What are you reading comic book at 12:30 at night?" I'm like, "Research, baby."
Yeah,
It's research.
got no choice. I got to know about Saber and Cannon, the bad guys.
And I think a part of it too, at least speaking for myself, is that I have this unrealistic or not unrealistic, but like this anxiety and this fear that makes no sense when it comes to like just like not knowing something. I think that's kind of ingrained as a comic fan, like just kind of like your nerd card and, like knowing stats and shit like that. So I think I tend to go like kind of overboard in the research, especially when it comes to like a creator like you, where I'm like finding old interviews. And then, but then the issue isn't I might run into like being too stiff with the outline or trying to cram too much into an interview. And it's like, even they're like, I don't remember shit from that run or there's some obscure fact or anything like that.
Yeah, and part of it was that was the joy of comics when you were a kid. Of these things that you stepped into Marvel and DC stuff, and there was existing history. Like part of the fun was the chase, right?
Sure,
and so, you know, sometimes there's this sort of perception that people they don't want to start in the middle of a run because they don't know what's going on. It's like, that used to be the reason, right? That was the fun. Like, well, I got to know, like at what issue Peter Parker first started dating Betty Brant. Oh my, I got to know that. Like, but I do still like that stuff. Yeah, but that's why I have to like sort of, if I'm super busy and I've got school, or it's like beginning of the semester, end of the semester. Or I'm working on something big and something comes up and someone says, "Hey, can you do this?" But it's like maybe I know part of it or I don't know enough of it. And I'll be like, "Shit, I can't. It's too much. It's too much research, So and the cheats, you can see it throughout my career where it's like, "Ah, fuck, I got to come up with a creator own book." Wait, I'm gonna set it in my hometown. Revival set in my hometown. I grew up in that town. I know that town because I grew up there. So I just did a cheat because I write location a lot in a way. So like. I said stuff in Chicago. It's like I know Chicago inside out, so I'll choose something like that. Like that I can.
I don't know if that's so much a cheat as like a smart move, right? Like write what you know,
Sure.
like write what like you live.
But and then you also don't want to just be like repeating yourself a bunch of times either.
It's like every single comic he writes is set in Chicago. It's like even Booster Gold. He's
He set Red Sonja, Army of Darkness in Chicago. What the hell's going on? Yeah.
All right. So back to Red Sonja versus Army of Darkness. I wanted to read the solicitation they have online, and then I want you to add anything that you feel is important for someone that is interested in the book that wants to pick it up and check it out. The solicitation for issue 1 reads, once again, Red Sonja versus Army of Darkness, issue 1 hit shops April 9th, which should be 1 week after this episode airs. The solicitation reads, get ready to sharpen your sword and load up your boomstick because it's time to face off against the undead hordes once more. In this all-new miniseries, everyone's favorite Deadite slaying hero, Ashley J. Williams Natch, finds himself hurtling again through space and time to battle against the forces of evil. This trip is special because he's finally caught a break. This time, he's teaming up with the she-devil herself, Red Sonja. But who's that lurking in the shadows? None other than Kulan Gath. And if the most dread wizard of the Hyborian age gets his hand on the Necronomicon, well, shit, that ain't gonna be good.
Is that in the real solicitation?
I kid you not. Yeah, that is in the solicitation. on top, it depends on like where you go to look for the solicitation. But on League of Comic Geeks, the first thing they have is a quote from Ash, and it reads, "Demon bitches are my specialty," which is a bar. I need that on a shirt.
Oh, that's from the book. that is in the book. Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
That
All
was
right,
from
so
the Joe. That's a great. That's so Joe Ryback. But yeah, the only quote that is from me is the one where it says "Demon bitches are my specialty,"
love it.
which Ash says in the first issue. But yeah, there you go. That says it right there.
Okay, and then in terms of your artists on this, Jim Terry is your collaborator on this series, and sorry, and I want to know like what does he bring to the table, and how is he cementing his place among some of like the all-time greats? Like when we think Red Sonja and Conan the Barbarian, you got to say names like obviously Roy Thomas, but art side Barry Windsor Smith, John Buscema, Frank Thorne. They've all drawn and contributed to Red Sonja and the lore. How would you say Terry or Jim is leaving his mark on the character?
I mean, so Jim and I did Deathstalker together at Vault Comics, and so Jim's also one of my oldest friends, another Chicago cartoonist. And when I signed up to do this book, he and I had just done Deathstalker together. We did a book called West of Sundown together for Vault as well. But Jim is the hugest Conan fan I know. He's a big fantasy fan. He's the guy that like rereads Lord of the Rings every year. He's that guy. And style-wise, like he has this sort of John Buscema, Jack Davis, Frank Thorne kind of like that lush, gritty fantasy style. That's how Jim draws. So I wrote this at him. Like I know what Jim likes. I know what Jim likes to draw. So this is us doing kind of what we did on Deathstalker, which is one of my favorite things I've ever made. If you haven't read it, please read Deathstalker. It is a sort of homage takedown of 80s fantasy barbarian stuff with Slash from Guns N' Roses.
Cool.
But it's, we're applying our aesthetic, our vibe that we got there, which I think we really figured something out. Like Deathstalker is near and dear to my heart. And I think we applied it to these existing characters as well.
And this isn't your first, obviously not your first collabo with Jim Terry, but one of the more interesting collaborations that I found between you two wasn't even comic book related. I guess kind of like comic adjacent, but there's a company called Cacao Berry, which is like a fine chocolate, company.
Yeah,
and I guess do you care sharing the story of how this collaboration of this chocolate company and Jim Terry came about? Because you've got it listed on your website and whatnot, but could you share the story?
Yeah, well, I mean, in addition to the comics and stuff, sometimes I do like creative consultant work, because that's just like it's a cool side hustle. And so Cacao Berry was looking to sort of their chocolate is mostly just for chefs, like they have a location here in Chicago, and they basically sell like straight to pastry chefs and stuff, and it's like high end, like fancy stuff. But they also were kind of like, well, we'd like to, sort of open it up to the public so people can, kind of get what we're doing. So they hired us to do like an art show, like and I hired a bunch of comic book artists to basically turn their different kinds of chocolate into characters.
Oh wow!
And so Jim did the marshmallow flavor guy, the like cooked bird chocolate one. But yeah, we had like an art show at a music venue, and I don't know, just did stuff. Like again, I just like to do stuff. So we did that. It was awesome. And I picked artists that I like to work with. So Jim is one of those guys. I knew he would do something crazy, and he did.
I guess like when you think about the ability to work, like your talent is artistic talent, right? Like vision and being able to draw, but also write, and just like ideas. Like people are paying you for your ideas because you're creative. Like what are some other, I guess, opportunities that maybe outside of the world of comics, or left field, or something like unexpected that you still are like, man, that was a really cool project?
I mean, I guess the biggest one is probably I did the label for the beer Zombie Dust, which is like a huge Chicago beer, with my brother Steve and my studio mate Sean Dove did the label. It is the most popular craft beer in the Midwest. We originally did it, it was just sort of like hey, this brewery wants to do this thing. We're like, yeah, cool, and we gave them this brewery. This thing that was like 15 years ago. It is
I just
now,
found it online.
Yeah, now it's like an institution. Like,
oh, that's badass. Okay,
like I'll go to a bar in Chicago or Indiana or Wisconsin, and there'll be like in fact, I have it behind me, there's a little the head, the tap topper. You know, they made the 3D tap topper. I'll see like a neon thing of
That's
how he
badass.
does.
Yeah.
It is definitely the thing that I've done that's gotten the most sort of eyes on it for sure. Like, and every once in a while, like somebody I knew from some other time or somebody will text me and be like, "Hey, I was just drunk at a bar and looked at this label and it says drawn by Tim Seeley on it." So,
have you ever had anyone show up to a convention and ask you to sign like a can or something?
Every year.
Hell
every year.
yeah!
I sign 6-packs. I sign cans. I sign bottles. I sign all kinds of shit. Yeah, I've signed those tapper heads. I've signed all kinds of stuff.
You know, I guess speaking on the topic of a convention, I got a question for you here because I was scrolling through your Instagram and you posted some commissions from a recent con. I don't know if it was like Terrificon or something, but it was like a slideshow. It was like a couple of commissions, but one that caught my eye that I could not stop thinking about was a venomized Jughead.
Oh, I just did that on Saturday. That was Saturday. That was at Indiana.
Okay, word. So yeah, I was like, I kind of need Marvel to do a shameless Archie crossover with a venomized Jughead. And I loved reading the comments and everyone's like, yo, that venomized Jughead, what about a story about him? Yeah. So like, what are some other like interesting or even disturbing commissions that you've done? Like, is anything off the table? Like when it comes to someone approaching you to do a commission?
Yeah, there's stuff I mean, not like for good taste or something, but I just won't do anything like really mean. I won't do that, like, but I mean, yeah, I'm kind of up for anything, and I've been doing this for 30 years, like, 31 years basically. I've been going to comic conventions, and I probably, in that time, have probably done 600, 700 comic conventions,
probably easy.
Yeah. So, so all the sketches, all the stuff. Like, if someone comes to me with something I haven't drawn, that's when I'm like, hell yes. Because obviously, like, people go, like, "Hey, can you draw me Nightwing?" I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah.
But like, this is my fucking 800th Nightwing, so or a Cassie, which I'm happy to do because it's my own character. But if someone's like, hey, can you draw me Doc Savage or like, Walt from Breaking Bad, or like, like if you give me something a little bit outside the box, like, I will be delighted. So
venomized.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
That's a good. Well, one of my favorite ones was someone had me draw. They said, "Can you do the musician Nick Cave," which is one of my favorites, combined with Batman? And I was like, "What?" And so I drew. Nick Cave has this old song when he was in Birthday Party called "Release the Bats." And so I drew Nick Cave as like this Joker kind of guy, and there's all these bats flying out. He's like, "Release the bats!" And I was like, "This is the greatest thing I've ever drawn." So, just like shit like that. If I can get creative, I will. That's always. I always like new shit. I'm not. Again, like, I get bored, but I will do it. But so yeah, if I can have fun with it, and challenge myself, that's usually kind of really valuable to me.
That's cool. All right, you just said that you've been going to conventions or been working in comics for 30 years, and I'm curious to hear this because I'm looking at your Wikipedia right now. I pulled it up, and it's got listed. And obviously Wikipedia can get things wrong or outdated, but it's got your first published work as a writer as G.I. Joe Frontline number 18 from December 2003. My question is that correct? Or I guess in your eyes, what do you consider like your first breakthrough into comics?
I mean, it's pretty close to that one. It would either be that or Love Bunny and Mr. Hell number 1. I think they might have come out around the same time. And because I was drawing stuff before that. I had drawn a lot of G.I. Joe even by the time I wrote that Frontline one. But I started out as an artist, and I didn't have the confidence to write stuff. I was like, well, I'm trained as an artist. I have a degree in illustration. Like, I can do that. But I just, like, I would usually either team up with someone or whatever. But then I was in the studio with Mike Norton. This is back when we worked both at Devil's Due Publishing here in Chicago. And we were talking about this idea. Mike had this idea to do the character Roadblock, and he wanted to have him a cooking show. So we would just go to lunch and then talk out these ideas. So it was really kind of co-written with Mike for sure, who would later go on to draw Revival. But I would consider that, that or Love Bunny Mr. Hell. Love Bunny Mr. Hell is kind of just my create-your-own book, and warts and all, it's like the first thing I wrote and drew that was published. But yeah, so it's probably that 2003 is probably my first published. So how many years ago is that? 22? 22.
Yeah, 22 years.
There you go. So I was doing stuff as a kid. up until like when I was 17. I started going to comic conventions and bringing books. I was doing stuff like I don't know, strips, and I was collaborating with people and putting out stuff like mini comics. I used to make mini comics and shit. So that I started when I was 17 in 1994. So there you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got and I see what you mean. Yeah, they've got a separate section for you under penciler because that's how much work you've done from writing and penciling and covering. They got for penciler G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, Volume 2, Issue 16, which was also 2003 time frame.
Yes, there we go. That
Wow.
makes sense. Yeah.
All right, I want to go back to Red Sonja, and this question is actually comes from a patron of the show, which is a benefit of being a patron of the podcast. I reach out to the patrons in the Patreon community, ask for questions. I tell them who's coming on the show, and I ask them for questions to be involved with the show. And this one comes from someone named Issue Number 3 Brad. He's a relatively new patron. Big shout out to Brad, but he wants to know, at any point throughout the history of film and television, who would Tim dreamcast as his perfect Red Sonja and Cassie?
Jeez. Wait, through all the cinema, so that they can have aged out, I guess, right at this point.
Yeah. I think yeah.
I mean, the person I always think of is Red Sonja in my head, and she's not maybe an actor, but I don't know if you've ever seen the cartoonist from ElfQuest, Wendy Penney. She was sort of the first sort of famous cosplayer, and she was an assistant to Frank Thorne. And so Wendy used to dress up as Red Sonja. And in my head, when I see real live actions, in the flesh Red Sonja, I see Wendy Penney. Partly is because I first saw that picture, I was probably, I don't know, 16, 17.
She looks like Red Sonja from the comics, like brought to life. Well, I mean, obviously, because
the inspiration. Yeah. So
wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So I see Wendy Penney in my head for sure as that. And then for Cassie, if we're going through all the space and time, I mean, a stunt casting thing I wish I could have done. And obviously, she's my age now. But Danielle Harris, she played the little girl in a Halloween 4. And then when she was in her like late teens, 20s, she would have been an awesome Cassie, and it would have been stunt casting because she was in a slash movie. Yeah. So Danielle Harris has been great.
Okay.
And then my friend Tiffany Shepard, she's a actress. She was in a bunch of horror movies. She's a friend of mine. She always thought I'd base Cassie on her, which I didn't. But Tiffany around 18, 19, all the way up till 30 something would have been an awesome Cassie. Obviously, Cassie has to be a teenager. That's kind of part of the shtick. She kind of has to be. But Tiffany would be amazing, and she's a great person. So yeah, one of those two would be like a great. If I get anybody I can get to do it, I would do that.
Not that anyone asked me, but I did some thinking about this question myself. And for Red Sonja, I've got Charlize Theron, and I think it's because I was watching Mad Max like Fury Road a month ago, and she's just been on my brain of how badass she is.
Yeah.
And I feel like she could probably, for real, wield a sword like Red Sonja. So I got Red Sonja. That's a good choice.
Yeah.
And then for Cassie, I've got Alexa Demi, who played Maddie on Euphoria.
Yeah.
She just has like that. I have full respect when I say this, but she's just got like that bad bitch energy. Like she's confident, she's sexy, like she's a young teenage.
Good. Oh yeah.
Well, I don't even know if she's a teenager. Oh, she played the teenager really well, but yeah, Alexa Demi, I think, would make for a great.
That's a good choice. That's a good one. When I saw The Substance, I kept thinking Margaret Qualley too. And even Margaret Qualley, like again, because Cassie sort of has to be a teenager by virtue of the genre, but Margaret Qualley would have made a good one too, for sure.
All right, Tim, I want to, I guess, on the topic of creator-owned stuff, and let's just like ride this train. I've got a question about Panel Punk Originals. I said in the intro, it is a company founded by you, your wife. I think you've got a third partner, and the way I understand it is that you guys help artists sell like original art, sketches, commissions, like directly to buyers and art collectors and consumers and things like that. With the I guess the kind of selling point is that you guys are artists yourself, you understand them well, and can help them kind of navigate the world of business and things like that. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. That's a better pitch than our pitch.
I don't know. I kind of like the Jen. So I guess what artists are among the stable? I guess what was the inspiration for starting it? Was it something like that you personally went through?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so for years I was represented by a company called Cadence Comic Art. I was one of Paulo's first clients. I've known him
Hmm,
for 20 some years, and then that kind of fell apart for various reasons. And you know, I was kicking around like, well, what to do next. I talked to various people about representing us and selling original art. For me, selling original art was always sort of like a side hustle because I had switched to so much writing that I wasn't doing as much art stuff. But it was always like a way to make extra money and you know, fun trips or Christmas or whatever. It's like you sell some original art. Oh,
yeah.
great, but then when that kind of all fell apart, I guess the thing I kept coming back to is that um, part of the problem I think kind of with comics in general is that there's always people who kind of come in and are business people or they're collector types, and they tend to think of everything as like a game, like it's all monetized, like
Hmm.
you know what I mean? It's like everything's a chase or everything's like a and no offense to anybody who does these things, but like that whatnot sort of auction world and
Sure.
stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. The
and it's
variants and
right, right, right.
the retail, etc. Yeah, all that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that is a valid part of comics. But I didn't want that applied to original art because I think for a lot of people, your original art is, it's special to you. It's things you actually put hands on, and it's becoming increasingly rare because so many people do things digitally. So we just wanted, like, is there a way to do this that we can treat it like what we think it should be treated with? And my wife and I have been running this gallery with my brother and Sean and Anthony, and we really liked it, and we really liked the way the way it introduced us to a lot of artists, the way it introduced us to a lot of collectors, and the way that we could kind of, decide the way it was presented.
Hmm.
So we thought, what if we applied like an art world version, you know, and again, not like the pretentious sort of fine art version, but the version that we were doing with our gallery to it. So my wife and I kind of set this up. Our partner is a guy named Alan Park, and his wife. They own Howling Pages, which is a comic book store here in Chicago. Alan comes from the world of gallery art. He is a printmaker, and he was sort of helping some other artists sell their stuff anyway. So we just teamed up. I mean, again, that Chicago thing where it's not that big and everybody knows
Yeah.
each other. Uh, so yeah, we're doing that, and we work with Aaron Campbell, Scott Hepburn. We're working with Gene Ha now.
Nice.
Jim Terry, Jimmy Kucha.
Wait. So
Um,
I hear Scott Hepburn. My mind goes to Minor
yeah,
Threat,
Minor
except I
Threats,
believe.
yes.
So you've got a bunch of original art for Minor Threat. I'm assuming, right?
I have it like 8 feet from
Oh
where
my
I'm sitting right
god,
now.
dude, Scott Hepburn is
Yeah, he's amazing.
insane.
Love that
I
guy.
mean, look, no disrespect to any other artist in the Minor Threat universe, but if Scott Hepburn isn't drawing it, I'm always like giving it the side eye at first. I'm like, man, this guy just he just did. I'm like, he just did the cover. God damn it! But no, that's an awesome lineup right there. And I guess as an aspiring, so I follow Jimmy Palmiotti on Twitter or X, whatever it is now, and he kind of single-handedly has piqued my interest when it comes to like original comic art, like the rarity of it, as well as like how it kind of holds better value, and versus like kind of just regular comic book collecting and things like that. And not that I'm trying to approach it just strictly monetize from a monetary perspective, um but it does pique my interest. And I'll never forget going to Heroes Con thinking like, oh, I'll buy some original comic art, and being instantly fucking humbled when I saw how expensive, like, like the
Sure.
Marvel DC stuff. So I guess and I guess maybe that's the wrong approach, like instantly trying to go like for the big pieces. But I guess any tips for aspiring
Oh,
comic art collectors?
oh, absolutely. Start small. I mean, you know,
Hmm.
the pieces you're probably talking about and the ones that give you sticker shock, it tends to be sort of like classic illustrators or key pieces. So like
Yep.
obviously the first appearance of the Spider-Man black costume is going to be a piece of historical art, and it's going to cost you some money, right? And so that kind of stuff can go for like I don't know, $20,000-$30,000, right? Is by demand that causes that sort of thing. But you don't need to do that. You can buy things that are important to you, like if from a book that you loved, and you can get stuff for 150, 250, $350 interior pages. Um, and so I would just recommend people, and we do this with our gallery too, is like buy art that means something to you. it's not. Don't think of it right off the bat. Oh, in 50 years I'm going to flip this. In 2 years I'm going to flip this. Buy it because it means something to you, and because you are now the person who holds that page of that comic that you love. That original is yours. It's in your house. You can display it. You can make it a conversation piece in your house. So I really encourage people to do, because I think when you see original art and you see what it takes to make that thing that comes out on the comic page in a certain way, it completely changes your perception of how this is. It makes it real, and I think if you see that the printed line, you're like, well, you just have this sort of like perception. Oh, it's always that way. It's like, no, when you see it, that is someone's wrist, turning and to make this arc of a line. It's like all this really beautiful stuff to it. I think it's really informative. So I absolutely recommend people get into buying original art. Start small, save up $150 at a convention and get yourself a commission, or get yourself a sketch, or find an original page of art. And the stuff that tends to go for a lower amount of money, it's not necessarily the splash pages or something like that, right? But I mean, I have one single page of my favorite comic of all time, Savage Dragon. I have one page of it because Eric doesn't sell much of it, one, and the pages that he does sell tend to be really expensive too, and they tend to get bought by Robert Kirkman. So,
damn you, Robert!
But I did manage to get one, and it's from like issue 7, and it's a great page, and it hangs in my office. Like it is a piece of inspiration for me. I have this one little moment of a comic that I love. So, and I've got other art, and I've traded with buddies and stuff. So, and people giving me shit. I've got the first appearance of Raptor from Nightwing that Javier Fernandez gave to me, and I feel like I really owe him one for that. But I have these things that are very personal to me, in my house. And if you're a comic fan, like connecting to things personally is what you do. So.
On the topic of like being able to appreciate like those very fine nuances and things that you don't see in the printed edition, I think my baby step version of getting into original comic art is IDW recently had a pretty badass 50% sale on like a lot of their artesian edition books.
Oh yeah.
So I ended up scooping up. They're right behind me. I don't feel like grabbing all of them, but I ended up scooping up like John Romita's The Amazing Spider-Man, Gil Kane, like a Gil Kane collection, some Hellboy one, and even like Bill Sienkiewicz's this like Moon Knights and his Electro run. But even just flipping through like these kind of smaller versions, and these are pretty accurate. Like they're high res scans. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It does make you appreciate it almost feels like you're getting a second story in addition to the main story on the page. But like, these small, exactly. And sometimes those process kind of make you appreciate certain things a little more. But Tim, you mentioned the black suit Spider-Man, and I think you were very humble and modest with that estimate, because it reminded me, I think it recently actually sold at a Heritage auction 2 years ago, and I found it. If you had to take a guess right now, if I was to ask you how much did the original artwork of Spider-Man first donning his black costume by Mike Zeck, I think it was page 25 of Secret Wars #8. If you just had to guess how much the original artwork recently sold for.
Recently, okay. Well, I should know this at least in the ballpark because I sell art. So, $80,000.
Not even close.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy shit!
I'll give you one hint. It's definitely an M.
Is that $1 million?
At least here, I'll give it to you. It sold in 2022. At least this is what this article is dated, for $3.36 million. And it is page 25 of Secret Wars #8 from 1984, featuring Mike Zeck's black and white artwork. Insane!
I didn't know it went for that much. I had no idea. That's insane. Wow. I mean, again, it is a piece of history. Art is weird, and again, I have to work in this world because we have a gallery. Like, it's not necessarily it's like perception, right? Perception is what drives it. So, like, what people will tell you about Spider-Man stuff is, and the reason it holds its value, Spider-Man is such a perfect idea. There will always be Spider-Man fans. There will be a Spider-Man cartoon in 50 years, right? There will be a Spider-Man movie in 25 years. There's just, it's so pure and perfect. Like, they'll keep making it. So that's kind of how that stuff, manages to be. I mean, that's a crazy fucking price, but I'm sure the person who bought it probably feels like they got their money's worth.
Oh, they've got it behind a bulletproof glass frame for sure. I would hope so. I'm hoping that is like a central talking point. Imagine like them throwing a dinner party and no one at this dinner party is asking about the original art.
Yeah,
I'd be so
Jesus.
fucking pissed.
Yeah, I'd be like, for $3.5 million, y'all better fucking bend down and worship at it.
Exactly. All right, Tim, I want to move on to a recent project works. I will have a link to Panel Punk originals in the show notes if anyone's curious in checking out what they've got going on there and buying some original art. But Tim, by the time this episode airs, you will already have a new comic project that would have been released, and I'm talking about. Oh, I just scrolled that past my notes. I am talking about. Okay, by the time this episode comes out, another project of yours will be out by now. Peacemaker Presents The Vigilante and Eagly Double Feature #1. You're writing issue 1. I think you're writing the entire series. But Mitch Gerard is doing the art for, I think, the first 2 issues. And you've got James Gunn himself, the big DC studio head honcho, on the project doing story consulting, which is no surprise there since he was a creator and the writer on the Peacemaker show, which was phenomenal. But I guess what can fans of the show expect from this comic? What type of shenanigans are we getting with Vigilante and Peacemaker and Eagly?
Yeah, so it's set up. Mitch does draw all 5 issues.
Oh, awesome!
And so it is set up. It's a split book. So the first story is the Vigilante story by me and Mitch, and then the second issue is the Eagly story by Rex Ogle. And they're tied together. They take place in separate places, but they share a similar plot point. And it's basically the rough pitch on this is Peacemaker and Eagly go on a vacation together, and then of course things go bad, and Eagly has to save the day, and that's Rex's story. And in our story, it's what happens when Peacemaker leaves Evergreen, and Vigilante, who thinks that Peacemaker is his best friend on Earth, and is immediately like, where's Peacemaker? Why did he take me on vacation with him? Because he thinks he's his best friend, not the damn eagle. And so Vigilante believes that a giant conspiracy has reached Evergreen. And so it's what happens when Peacemaker leaves town and Vigilante is left by himself. That's the story, and it's insane. The first issue is like I just got my comps and I read. I was like, I can't believe they let us do any of this shit. I mean, it is.
Well, it's got the black label. It's got the black label on it, so you get a lot of leeway. Might I add, first of all, I didn't know that Mitch Gerard was doing the entire art. That's awesome to hear. I'm a big fan of Mitch Gerard. He did the cover. He's the cover artist, I think, for all the cover A's. But for issue 1, there is possibly the greatest comic book cover I've ever seen in my life. Cover B for issue 1 is drawn by Dan Panosian, and it is a picture of Eagly holding some safety instructions. And I don't know why this tickles me so, but he's got the American flag behind him.
Yeah.
And Eagly just looks so proud. I would fucking hug that eagle.
Yeah, he's on an airplane.
Oh, damn, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that is awesome. I can't wait. I guess what was it like? Did you have any direct contact with James Gunn? Did you guys hop on a call to talk through things? Like, I guess how is it sharing creative control with someone like James Gunn?
James and I talked over Twitter. Twitter direct messages.
Okay.
But I know we know each other, but in this, sort of like the way that people know each other in Hollywood stuff. But way back in the day, going back to Hackslash, when Hackslash first got sold the rights to a movie studio, James was my pick to write and direct it because he had just made Splinter, and I loved his Trauma stuff. And, and we had done a Trauma comic where I emailed James back in like 2004 or something, 2005, to try to get him to write it. Instead, he sort of gave me some plot ideas, and so we did this Trauma comic. So I know his work really well, love his stuff, and he's familiar with my stuff. And when I saw Peacemaker TV show, I was like, you have to let me write Vigilante. I was like, this is my. He looks like Jeffrey Dahmer. He is a crazy Wisconsin, and like I love that he was like a hyper liberal. He was always like, I hate racists, and
yeah.
Like I all those things. Like this is perfect. This is me. And so I just sent him a message on Twitter. I was like, "You have to let me do the comic for that." And at some point, he got back to me. and was like, "I think we might be able to do that." So I emailed Katie Kubert at DC and said, "Hey, we can do this. I've got an idea. We can get James to give us the okay on the plot." And then we worked on it for 3 years. So to get it going, and now it's coming out, and I'm really excited to people read it. But it was, it was a big process of like making sure that it was tied to the James's version of the characters, that it fit the tone, giving the Mitch a lot of time to do his wonderful art on it. So it's I'm really proud of it. I can't believe, like, when you get to issue 4, there's shit in there I cannot believe DC Comics let us do. Yeah. So.
Okay, I can't wait to check this out. All right, folks. Once again, that is Peacemaker Presents the Vigilante Eagly Double Feature #1. It'll be out. It'll be out by the time this episode comes out, so go pick up issue 2 next month or something. But Tim, I'm thinking, I had this question just pop up, but co-collaborate, sharing story duties with James Gunn, Local Man, sharing art and story duties with Tony Fleegs, the art gallery, you and your wife and your partner. It seems like collaboration is a big thing to you, and I find that interesting because considering the landscape of comics and business side of comics, like co-collaborating can always be like a weird, maybe sensitive topic when it comes to people working in comics and things like that. But it seems like you're all about it, and I'm curious, like, what advantage do you find in co-collaborating? And like, have you always been kind of like, hey, I don't need full control, like, I'm down to work with others?
Yeah, I mean, comics is often, it can be done by one person, right? You can be the auteur cartoonist, you can be Chris Ware, or or Art Spiegelman, and just like take care of everything. And there's appeal to that for sure. And I could do that. I can write and draw, so I could do that, and I've done it on some things. I didn't color them or whatever, but I could write and draw something and work with somebody. But comics is often collaborative, and it can be collaborative between just like 2 or 3 people. Like TV it's collaborative, but it's like 50 or 100 or something. I like comics that can be collaborative with a few people could do something. And Tony and I could do majority of Local Man, just us, and then we would call in great colorists and and stuff to work with us. Like Brian Reber, and having this option of doing something small but doing something large is really appealing to me. And I like the different flavors I get when I work with different people, I guess. So if I work with Tony, we get something. I'm kind of like, here's a shit ton of ideas, and Tony can be like, here's those ideas that are good, and here's the ones that are shit. And like, so that's when I work with Tony, like, that's what I get. And then if I work with, like different collaborators, I get different things. Like working with James, like, I'm sort of adapting parts of his voice, which is also really natural to me, but I never get to be really abrasively gross and funny. Like, I never get to do that because, I mean, Local Man I did, but they never let me do that normally on a DC Marvel book. Like, that kind of writing, like the way James does things, that's the most natural thing for me to do. If I work with James, I get to do that, and then, so for me, it's everything is a different collaboration interaction, so, and I like the different, I just like the different vibes it allows me to do. It's also, again, I'm not a, I'm not a big guy who just likes to be by himself. I like to talk. I like to have an excuse to call somebody. So collaboration does that,
Yeah, I can get behind that. Tim, I got one last question for you, and it's because I've had this phrase stuck in my head. It just kind of tickled me when I read your bio. But I said in the intro that you're one of these slash people. You're a writer slash artist, and it got me thinking about some of my other favorite like slash people in comics. People that talented individuals that are capable of spinning a good yarn and also making said story look beautiful. So names that come to mind to me, Frank Miller, Barry Windsor Smith, Mike Mignola, and the list goes on. But I want to hear, who are some of your favorite slash people?
Oh, well, Eric Larson for sure. Daniel Klaus. Let's see, who else do I love? I mean, so many. Evan Dorkin, Phil Hester, Jack Kirby, John Byrne. Let's see, who else? I mean,
let me ask it.
Tony Fleegs. I love when he does both things. He does great stuff.
I guess let me refine that question. among all of the very talented Slash people out there, especially the ones that you just named, I guess which one has had the most profound impact on your career in terms of like showing you it's possible to do both at a high level?
Oh, James O'Barr and Eric Larson for sure. I mean, it's kind of where my style comes from. I think it's
Sure.
those two guys. Somehow, I'm a fusion of the Crow and Savage Dragon. Somehow, like horror goth and then bombastic, punchy shit. I guess. So definitely like those two. I think I have both their comics like above my head here. So yeah, definitely those two.
Solid answer. All right, ladies and gents, this is the Shortbox Podcast, and we just finished talking to. I'm sorry. Whoa, what the hell? Ladies and gents, this is the Shortbox Podcast, and we just finished talking to Tim Seeley about his career, his life, and art. Be sure to check out his new project, Red Sonja versus the Army of Darkness. #1, it hits shops April 9th. And while you're at it, why not go ahead and pick up and see if you can find a copy of Peacemaker Presents the Vigilante / Eagly Double Feature #1, also in shops by the time you're hearing this episode. I'll have links to pre-order the book online. I'll have links to Tim's social media page. You can check out the Venomized Jughead on his Instagram. I'll have links to the art gallery as well. Go give him a follow. Tim, any parting words or shameless plug before we wrap up?
Man, thanks for the interview. In depth, I usually hate the just here's me repeating some bullshit points that I need to sell. It's nice to actually talk. See, I'm that guy. Like bullshit. So there you go.
There we go, Tim. Well, look, I am excited to check out Revival. I'm excited to check out the Red Sonja versus Army of Darkness. And I am looking forward to one day reading new Spider-Man series written by Tim Seeley. We put him back out there in the universe. God damn it.
Thanks so much.